Okay, and now we are commencing with the January 21st, 2019 edition of Prehistoric Traveler's Guide podcast. I am your host, Greg Nevin, and on my panel today we are doing a Prehistoric Times duology special, because welcoming to the show for the very first time is Prehistoric Times Facebook admin and head writer, as he likes to call himself, Mr. Phil Hore.
G'day, everybody. I'm Australian.
So welcome to the panel, mate.
Yeah, thanks, buddy.
And welcoming in my next co-host is a guy I'm welcoming back to the show since the Steve Alton session back in September, the head honcho of PT Magazine, Mr. Mike Fredericks. Welcome back.
What's up?
He's not Australian.
I have a California accent.
Nothing like starting off with a little bit of a comedy to kickstart the show. And all right, I
Very little.
be
Yeah.
proud
Very
to
little.
Introduce our guest of honor tonight. She is a very accomplished paleo artist in-house at the Royal Ontario Museum, the host of the acclaimed YouTube web series Animalogic, and is perhaps famous for her depiction of the Ankylosaur Zool, someone I actually had the privilege of calling one of my besties in the paleo community. She is Danielle Dufault. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me here. And, not to make things too crazy, but I am Canadian. Should I follow that with A? I should probably say A.
Yeah,
Canadian, eh?
We're part of the Commonwealth up against these Yanks.
Oh, man. There were 2 versus 1 here. Or wait, 2 versus 2. Oh, dear. We're at an impasse.
We can take them.
Yeah.
Probably.
Okay, before we get to the big heart of the discussion, Danielle, the question that I usually like to ask people is, just tell us more about yourself. Tell us about your early life growing up and some of the things that led you to becoming a paleo artist. And I'll further elaborate on these with some specific questions I've got, but just give us a general synopsis of early life to now.
Sure. Well, I guess the biggest statement I can make is that I've always had an absolute fascination in biology. It's always been my favorite subject to read and to draw. And since a very young age, I took an interest in that because I was surrounded with nature. I grew up in a very small town in northern Quebec called Temiskaming. And my backyard was a mountainside, a beautiful boreal forest mountainside. So every day I'd spend a lot of time outside, hiking, climbing, just playing out in nature and just learning about as much of it as I could. So from a young age, I wanted to try and draw the things around me and started to try and develop a knack for drawing things realistically. And I wanted to capture all the features that would really just fascinate me about nature. My interest in prehistory, that stemmed from a very young age as well. Where I lived, there were a lot of Ordovician and Silurian formations, all being part of the boreal shield. And my parents would take me out on hikes all the time, and we'd go rock collecting in streams, and we'd go catching tadpoles, and I would always have the big questions of, how does a tadpole become a frog? How does a caterpillar become a butterfly? And every now and then we'd find rocks in the streams that would have little bits of, just shell fossils or something like that. And all of that kind of stemmed my love for paleontology and all the associated branches of biology from a really young age. And of course, I'll never forget the time that my parents took me to a museum for the first time. And I got to, it was just kind of like an open book full of all the questions that I would endlessly be asking. And my parents would just set me free there for the day, and I would, absorb like a sponge. So from there, it's always been a big question for me whether I wanted to become an artist or become a biologist or a scientist of some kind in biology. I always kind of imagined that paleontology in particular, despite being a big love of mine and a big passion since a young age, I never really thought that it would be a possible venue, but I pushed hard enough to get into that, and the opportunities arose when I moved to Toronto. I started school, or post-secondary school, just outside of Toronto at Sheridan College, and I joined the Technical and Scientific Illustration Bachelor degree there, and found connections leading me to the museum at the Royal Ontario Museum, and I found my way in and decided I'd never leave. They haven't been able to shake me since.
That's awesome, Danielle, and I'd like to maybe start with my this is my first two questions about how things got started. If you want to
Sure.
elaborate on them. My first one is, what was the big spark that inspired your love of overall paleontology, and probably by proxy, what got you inspired into becoming a paleo artist specifically?
Okay, well, let's see. The big moment, I don't know if there was one particular moment that led me to want to pursue paleontology, but I do remember a few key things, from early childhood that made me want to keep asking those questions. Like I mentioned before, searching for little fossil rocks in streams with my parents as a kid, that was a big moment, and I must have been maybe just 5 years old or something. But when they took me to that first museum, the first museum I've ever been to was called Science North, and that's in Sudbury. They had a program called the Nature Exchange Program, where you could bring in, little bits and pieces of nature and trade it in for other things. Often, most of it was just, bits of rock, and you could trade in your coolest rocks or pine cones or little bones that you've found, and that would give you credit towards buying, these little rewards, you could say. And I remember this one time hiking out in the forest with my parents. We found a beautiful intact deer skeleton. And of course, my first thought was, well, we need to take this skull and bring it to the museum. So that's exactly what we did. And I got a bunch of points in their nature exchange program. And in return, I got to pick something special. And that special thing for me was, it was a fossil. It was the first fossil I've ever acquired. And it's nothing to write home about. It's just a little Orthoceras shell. And, but it's beautiful, it's polished. But that right there was kind of one of those moments where I decided, well, hey, there's so much to learn here. I have so many questions, and I want to know more. And I guess I've been asking questions about paleontology ever since. I do work in both invert and vertebrate paleontology, so I can't say that my interest is limited solely to dinosaurs, although that might be the topic of conversation today. Other than that, a lot of the media that I consumed as a kid definitely had a theme, you could say. Dinosaurs were pretty big in the 90s. I was a 90s kid, grew up mostly in the 90s, born in 88. And I was one of those kids who would watch movies until it drove my parents absolutely insane. Of course, one of those movies was Land Before Time, because that was of my generation. I believe it came out the year I was born in 88.
You're making me feel old.
Sorry?
You're making me feel very old.
Oops. Not my intention. But yeah, it's hard to say. Who doesn't love Land Before Time? It still makes me cry. It's still a beautifully animated film. But also I started to acquire a little library of dinosaur books, and I became a fan of all the depictions and imagery of dinosaurs, and I always thought it was so fascinating how everyone's idea of a dinosaur looked different. And I always wondered why. I thought, a Tyrannosaurus should look a certain way, shouldn't it? Why does everyone draw them differently? And I started to explore different paleo artists and just see what kinds of different techniques they worked in. And of course, I'd do all kinds of doodles myself. None of them were very good. I was a kid. But I kept on working on that. And paleo art is a love of mine that I've just kept on going with. So, yeah. I hope that answers a little bit of your question.
You also knocked out one of my other questions without even realizing it.
Oh, sorry about that.
That was about what was the first museum you gone to, which you
Oh.
already answered.
Oh, there we go. Yep. Good old North Bay. Or no, so Sudbury. Sudbury is where it is. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. I'll go with my third question, then I'll let the other guys have a turn here. This one is about, were there any particular artists, paleo or otherwise, who inspired you while you were growing up, and whom are your current, inspirations to this day?
Oh yeah. Gosh, there's so many paleo artists that I love and admire that I'm definitely going to be missing a large chunk of my favorites because I'm on the spot. But I'll do my best to answer. I do remember very clearly that one of the first big dinosaur books that I acquired as a kid was the Illustrated Encyclopedia of Dinosaurs. This one was the one written by David Norman, and all the illustrations were done by John Sibick. A lot of the art in this book is just beautiful technical skeletal drawings, all stipple style, next to these beautifully painted life restorations of all the variety of different dinosaur groups. And this was one of the earliest dinosaur books that I acquired, but it was also, probably really technical for a kid my age at the time. So I took in a lot, and I think that might have been where I truly started to love the idea of not just appreciating what an animal looks like on the outside, but also the inside, because so much of that was featured. I was always just fascinated with how they showed the anatomy, even if I didn't understand it at the time. So yeah, John Sibick, big love for his work. Also, I would say, one of the artists that I admire the most is Doug Henderson. To me, he's kind of the very pinnacle of artistry and imaginative reconstruction, you could say. He's making these creatures that don't exist today look like just photographs from a National Geographic, And I feel like he captures the environment so believably that you could just step right into them. If I could ever become half of the artist that he is, then, I'd be lucky. I'm trying to think who else right now. I guess early on when I was growing up, a lot of the art that I was familiar with was probably the more classical paleo artists, like Charles Knight and Snetic Burian. A lot of what I was able to find in libraries and whatnot were older books. So that is really where I started to fall in love with paleo art.
Yeah, a little personal story about Doug. Doug Henderson was one of the first artists I was ever exposed to.
Oh yeah.
As a child, that one book he illustrated has some incredibly gorgeous watercolor paintings.
Absolutely.
And for me,
yeah, I know which one you're talking about. I have it in my library too.
Yeah, I think that book actually had his Dinosuchus and Cryosaurus painting in there. That's an awesome piece.
Mm-hmm.
I still think his art where he's got the ichthyosaurs and the plesiosaurs going through the surf.
Oh, I was going to bring that up
too.
too.
Best ever.
I absolutely agree. Yeah, I have a print of one of those in my home here, and just the way that he captures light going through water, it's just absolutely breathtaking. It just wows me every time. Yeah.
This is where I'll let Phil, though, to take over for a little while.
All right.
I'm so special. Having a look at your website, you've got the paleo side and the more nature side, and like stunning images, like they're beautiful. And I was looking at the Nautilus one. So, as you're at the ROM, do you get to go through the specimen drawers and everything and pick out stuff that you can then use to paint, or are you accessing other sorts of information to create your images?
I use a variety of references, I suppose, for for the pieces that I do. I mean, I'm definitely very lucky to have access to all of the collections at the ROM because they're crazy good collections, very thorough. I do have access to the collections. Obviously, I need to go through the collections managers and just to ask for some permission to get in. But I do go there for reference for all kinds of things, be it extant or extinct. For the most part, I do spend my time in the Vert Paleo collections, since that's within my own department. But if I need to draw something else, if I'm doing an episode for Animalogic on something that's around today, then I can go and take a look at some wet or dry specimens at the ROM, which is really nice. I should mention also that museums like the ROM are public collections. And that means that so long as you ask for permission and schedule a time to go in and try and see things, then all of the reference collections are there for the public to access. Even though it's not on display, people can go in and collect that information that's there. So just in case anyone was curious, you should bother because it's worth it.
Absolutely. Like I got to work at the London Natural History Museum, and it's half the thrill is just going through the drawers, like what they've got there is just, you cannot believe some of the names attached to these specimens. So so with your artwork, like at the museum, like obviously, new discoveries show up, so they want a piece of art for that. But do you ever get to do something that you want to do? Like there's an animal or a specimen or something that you want to create a piece of art for, so you can say, oh, can I actually do this one?
If that was something I wanted to do, I could definitely do it. But to be completely honest, I'm so busy with work these days that I haven't really been doing work just for myself. I haven't really been taking on personal projects. Most of my projects that I take on are work-related in some way, shape, or form. Be it for the ROM, be it for commission, for other paleontologists, or for my YouTube series, Animalogic. I'm a little bit busy.
And like, it's not like the ROM doesn't make a lot of discoveries there. So
well, right, yeah. I mean, there's more projects going on than I can even be a part of. So honestly, it's there's a lot to be done there.
And there's always secrecy behind things. So do you get a bit of time? Like if Zool was obviously a famous one, but is there something coming down the pipe works that is coming? You get to do the artwork, but you're kind of excited about finally getting to release your artwork or your product for some new discovery that's about to show up?
Oh yeah, that's honestly one of my favorite things about this position is that I get to work hand in hand with the researchers on every project. So I do obviously get, I get to see the process of data collection and research and analysis, and oftentimes, I'll be doing the figures or reconstructions for their papers. And one thing that's really nice is that I get to give my own interpretations of things every now and then, and it might even change the description of certain features, because when a scientist is trying to describe a fossil verbally, they might be omitting certain features that visually would be interpreted in a different way. So say I'm doing a skeletal reconstruction or a skeletal bone diagram of let's say, a hadrosaur brain case, for example. Those are pretty difficult sutures to interpret. And occasionally, if I give my own interpretation, that might help the scientists themselves or the researchers with their written interpretation, because I'm trying to clarify that information for them, So it's pretty exciting being part of the process, and there is always some kind of schedule that we always have to work on, and I have deadlines just as well as everyone else does, and especially when it comes to publishing papers and whatnot, I need to make sure that I'm done in time for everyone else's schedule. And it is really exciting, but at the same time, it's kind of tough because I can't just talk to people about what I'm working on, because there's all these all these NDAs, I guess you could say.
Oh no, it happened we were just released the new Sue in her new environment, and so we got to see it beforehand, but there was strictly no photos. You can't say anything. This is going to be a huge episode of release. So just I've noticed that you also go out and do a bit of digging at yourself. So is there one side you prefer over the other? Like, do you prefer sitting in a lovely air-conditioned office and producing some artwork, or do you prefer to go out in the hot, dusty, bug-filled snake environment digging for fossils?
Oh my goodness. I would spend, I mean, right now I'm lucky enough that I get to join on fossil digs at all. And I usually go out for about 2 to 3 weeks during the summer. But if I could spend half my year out there, I would. I love it so much. It's the kind of work vacation that I think everyone should take. Just go and be dirty in a desert for a little while, Just live in a tent and dig bones all day. Sleep great because you're physically exhausted. Just make these great bonds with people, and you just get so excited. Even if you're digging all day and you find nothing, there's always that hope, that excitement that maybe the next day there'll be something. And
I was going to say, it sounded like you'd said too much and the cops were coming for you.
Oh, you could hear that?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
But they'd be Canadian police, so they'd be polite about it.
Yeah, they'd be like, oh, sorry to interrupt. But yeah, I mean, I think I need that balance because the whole fieldwork experience is so important to me. But I do love being able to just sit in a room, me and a fossil and some researchers, I guess. It's not, yeah. And just, learning to interpret these bits of the past and bring them to life. Like I'd say I'm pretty lucky with what I have here.
Living the dream.
I am.
Might hand it over to some of the other guys. Does somebody else have a question?
Yeah, I guess that's me, right?
Yep, go. You're up,
This
Mike.
Hi, Mike.
I always said I could never be cool because I can't keep my mouth shut, and I've got the thing on mute so that I'm not tempted to talk over either you or Phil. But as you were kind of telling me ahead of time, but you have a full-time job as the artist at the Royal Ontario Museum, right?
That's right. Yeah, I'm the full-time scientific illustrator in paleontology at the ROM.
So a lot of people that read my magazine are going to want to know, how the heck did you get that job, and how can they get one?
Well, you'd have to fight me.
At a different museum, of course.
Right. So other than that, I can kind of tell you how I got there myself. I know that it's not really a typical position that most museums have, but it's definitely worth trying. To be honest, it's not a position that existed at the Royal Ontario Museum until I had it created. So back in 2011, I needed to get an internship for my last year of my degree, and I became aware of a summer internship opportunity offered in David Evans' lab at the ROM for Vert Paleo. And as soon as I saw that, I said, well, okay, this is what I'm doing. I have to get this. And I put together the best portfolio that I possibly could muster at the time, and I got an interview and I got the position. So that summer, I got to illustrate some fossils, do some traditional stipple drawings for some papers that were being worked on, and that's when I really got the first taste of it. And after I graduated from that position, well, actually, sorry, that was 2011. Right, so after the summer internship, I decided to spend my last year of school doing my thesis with the Paleo Lab. So I focused my thesis on Paleoart and decided to describe and illustrate a new specimen of Pachycephalosaurus, which, oddly enough, is still not published. It will be someday. Just kind of a back burner for the David Evans lab right now, but that's okay. So I spent a lot of time working on the skull, and I did a fossil or a skeletal reconstruction and a life scene restoration, and that became my whole last year of school. So I found a way to try and work really closely with the lab that was there even during my school time, because I still wanted to make work for them that was still going to be valid for my own schooling. So by the time I graduated from school, I had already made a really good relationship with everyone in the lab, and they decided to start just contracting me little projects one at a time. So I'd come in, maybe 2 days a week and work on some drawings for papers that they were working on, and I started doing a few press release images, and just little contract to contract turned into longer contracts, and I worked for 2 years on contract full time, by which point they decided, I think in 2014, that they were going to try and create an actual position for a paleoartist. And because they finally realized that it didn't make sense to just keep sending contract after contract when the work amount itself was not diminishing. It still isn't. I'd say the ROM could even use an extra paleo artist to cover all the things that really need to get done.
Oh, be careful what you say.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just honest. We still contract out some work that needs to get done. For example, a young artist here in Toronto named Henry Sharp, he's been a good close friend to our lab for a little while. He just did a commission for our lab for a paper. So, there's still work opportunities to try and reach for. And but that's kind of the history of the position that I'm in right now. And I'm just constantly trying to keep up with everything that our researchers are doing, but there's so much to be done and so much that is continuing to get done. So, every year there's more fossils that we find, and every year there's more projects to be done. So, so long as there's more students.
It's just amazing, all the new discoveries anymore. It's just amazing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, people are pretty productive.
So do you help with actual museum exhibits at all, or not so much?
I have started doing that as of this year. This year I've been put on, I was put on the Zool exhibit project, and I spent a pretty good portion of my time at the ROM working on that. So I was hired to do a couple of murals for this exhibit on the dinosaur Zool Crurivistator. And that's now open at the ROM, and it's got 2 murals that I've made for it, covering 5 of the walls. So that's been the first time that I was able to actually do some exhibit work and design for that sake. And I'm pretty excited to do some more. It looks like I'm going to be pulled in on another paleontology exhibit that's going to be opening in the ROM in a couple of years from now. So. It's just in the early stages.
Great. Now, can anyone that works at the museum come over and ask you to do artwork for them?
Not necessarily. It needs to be talked about through my boss. I mean, my boss is Dr. David Evans at the ROM, and he's the one who will kind of relegate my time to whatever projects seem to be most dire. And I guess the exhibits teams and the research and curator teams they're a little bit separate, and all that needs to be worked out through human resources and whatnot. Some of it's just. And
I was even thinking of scientists that had nothing to do with paleontology.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, they don't really get to decide how I spend my time. It's pretty much all paleontology because that's all I really have time for. If I could do more, I sure would.
And something along those lines, and then I'll let Greg come back. But do the scientists, do you feel they're looking over your shoulder? I mean, is it maddening when you're trying to work and they're no, not that, no, That's
something I kind of had to just get used to and deal with. In fact, I kind of appreciate the fact that they're there over my shoulder because, you know, the whole point of what I'm doing is to get it right. So if they can help guide me on getting it right, then, yeah, I'm ready to take as much criticism as they have, you know. I'm here to represent their work. So, you know, the more feedback they can give me, the better.
Absolutely, yeah. Okay, thanks.
No worries.
Okay, I'm coming back in here, and I've got a multi-part question. One of them might be combined with the three that Dakota submitted. I will run through his three, then I'll see if it's any similar. Okay, Dakota's first question is, what do you consider to be the easiest organisms to reconstruct? Second one is, what are the most difficult animals to reconstruct? This third one is a hybrid, is basically similar to mine, but I'll ask his. What is your preferred medium to work with, and are there any special techniques to use while producing art? And I'll supplement that, is there a particular reason you choose that particular medium or methodology behind your artwork?
Okay, for that first question, first one was the hardest ones or the easiest ones?
Easy difficulty.
All right. So the easiest animals to reconstruct, that's a pretty easy answer for me. I would say it's animals that have direct analogs that exist today. I mean, in terms of trying to find reference and trying to make an animal look believable, it's pretty tough if you don't have something to compare to, right? So mammals, for example, those are generally a little bit easier to compare to or to reconstruct because we're familiar with their muscle arrangements, we're familiar with their tissues, we're familiar with even their behaviors. So even if it's not necessarily completely accurate, and we might not get, a fur color or a fur texture correct because that's not preserved, we can at least make a guess that would look somewhat believable. Another example would be arthropods. Arthropods, when they're preserved, oftentimes we have these beautiful exoskeletons that show exactly what shape they are. I really love working on arthropods from the Burgess Shale for that reason, because despite the fact that they haven't been around for however many millions of years, they still have these structures that are clear and obvious to reconstruct. And for that sake, I mean, we can make inferences of what they might have looked like in terms of color just based off of structures and pigments that exist in similar tissues today, like chitin from a beetle. It's got a lot of different potentials for color, so we can actually play with those colors in reconstructing an extinct arthropod of similar shape or build. In terms of hardest things to reconstruct, it's also a similar answer. It's the stuff that we have no analogs to, nothing similar today to compare to. That makes it really difficult to reconstruct something. So I would say in general, ornithischian dinosaurs are not easy to make believable because we have nothing today that is even remotely related. So as much as I love them, they're definitely my favorite group of dinosaurs, large group, but they're also very challenging because there's just so many questions that we can't answer, which makes it fun but also incredibly challenging. Yeah. What was the third question that you had?
The third one was about your preferred medium to work with art-wise, and do you have any special techniques to use while producing your art, and why you prefer these methods?
Okay, so the way that I work and prefer to work is in Photoshop, and I use my trusty Intuos Wacom tablet. So I do really like to paint digitally, and part of the reason for that is because paleontology is a science that keeps on changing. Even when I'm working on a project, the description for something might change and get reinterpreted. Or maybe a paper describing something similar will come out, and suddenly you have to change the way that you think about something. So you need to be able to constantly edit your artwork. A good example for that would be, over the past couple of years, there's been all these papers about Tyrannosaurid integument. And at the ROM for a couple of years ago, I had to do just like a portrait of a Gorgosaurus and of a T-Rex. And when I did these, that Eutyrannus paper describing all those fluffy T-Rex cousins, that just came out. So, my boss, David Evans, he insisted that these guys, it would be appropriate to make them pretty fluffy as well. So I had fun making these bear-like, a bear-like T-Rex and a fluffy Gorgosaurus. And then, about a year later, I guess this was about a year ago, then came that paper by Bell and, oh geez, I'm blanking, Thomas Carr. And that one was describing a bunch of skin impressions or fossilized skin of a Tyrannosaurid, or T-Rex itself, I suppose. So of course then you need to be able to edit that. And luckily I had separated the scales, or sorry, not the scales, but the base of the drawing, like the underdrawing, the bones and the skin and the flesh. I had separated all of that onto different layers in my Photoshop files, so I could actually just remove the fluffy, feathery integument layer, and then just draw a bunch of, like, a nice thick skin layer that better represented those two taxon based on the current research. So I think that's a really important thing to remember, that Paleoart's going to keep on changing, and that we can't stay too attached to our ideas. And that's why I think that digital is a really good way to keep representing that.
Danielle made me think of something too, if I may interrupt rudely.
Sure.
Do you remember an artist named Brian Franzak?
Ah, that does ring a bell.
He might have been a little before your time, but he was a very talented, and still is. And he would never sell his paintings, and he would actually paint over them as new discoveries were discovered,
Oh, so really?
That was kind of before the days of Photoshop.
Yeah.
Stuff,
Well, that's adding another layer, all right. Wow. Did he sell them once he added extra layers and painted over them?
I can't swear to him never selling any, but I don't think so.
Oh, wow. I'm going to have to look that up.
Yeah.
I hope that he photographed the before and afters, because I'd love to see
sure. No, there's a lot of books that have his art in them.
Okay. I'm sure I've seen the books. I'm just not great with names. I've seen the images.
You just made me think of him, that's all.
Okay. Yeah. As for other artistic techniques, one that I'm a really big fan of is called Coquille drawing, or stipple drawing. Well, it's stipple drawing using Coquille board. Sorry, I'm a little bit mixed up here. It's a technique that's pretty classic, and what it does is it emulates the look of like a pen and ink stipple drawing, but it's much less hard on your hands, and it's much faster. So if you're working against time and you don't want to get carpal tunnel syndrome, this is a good way to do it. It's like a really thick board, paper board, you could say. It's like a thick paper board, but it has all this really small and raised texture, so that when you run a Conte pencil over it, all those little raised areas, it picks up on the black Conte. And what it looks like after you darken certain areas, it just looks like stipple, because it's only those little raised areas that get any Conte on them. And when you reduce that down digitally, if you scan that in and reduce it down, then it really just looks like stipple. And that's a really nice technique for drawing fossil specimens, and it emulates that classic look that's still sought after in a lot of formal descriptions of fossils and whatnot.
Nice. I hadn't heard of that. That's nice.
Might be incredibly helpful to other paleo artist friends I have that work in the digital field.
Yeah, the paper's called Coquille board. So it's a little bit hard to find, but you can still buy it these days. It's a bit of an older technique.
Okay, I'll go to my fourth question, and it's another one submitted from Facebook. This is from Chris Acosta from the Facebook group Dinosaurs. His question is, I've always wondered if paleo artists are tempted to give their subjects a personal signature, anatomical embellishments, etc., as opposed to preserving as much accuracy as possible. Is this something that you encounter, and is this considered taboo among others in the field?
I think that depends on the extent of the individual flair that they're adding. And it also depends on what the purpose of the paleo art that you're making is, too. You know, if you're trying to do something, if you've been commissioned to make paleo art for a lab who's doing a publication of some sort, you really want to make sure that you're representing their ideal view of this dinosaur. If you're doing it for your own sake and you're just testing your own skills and trying to make something beautiful and accurate to your own knowledge, as it all is, then I think that there is some liberty there to kind of explore some structures that, you know, just may or may not be there. Because let's be honest, we don't know really what really is or isn't there. I think that All Yesterdays, so you guys might be familiar with the book called All Yesterdays. It explored a lot of ideas of what any unpreserved physical aspects might be on dinosaurs. So, you know, how chubby might they be, or how fluffy, what kind of behaviors they might have. And it was all just a bunch of really extremely stretched paleo art. And I think that that's an important exploration, because sometimes we're almost too conservative. Yes, that's right. It was John Conway and Darren Naish, and one more was involved in that.
CM Kozman.
That's the one, yeah.
I got to work with John. He actually started as a 15-year-old, I think, at the National Dinosaur Museum in Canberra.
Oh, really?
And so, yeah, I knew him when he was a young whippersnapper, and we've still got he did a lot of the murals at the museum, and we've got a lot of his art lying around, but it's been quite interesting to watch him grow and bloom and blossom.
Oh, that's incredible. I know John Conway just a little bit. He apparently worked at a studio that I also worked in for about a year after I graduated. It was a place called Hall Train Studios, and it was an exhibit builder named Hall Train, and he created these beautiful sculptures that were often replicated in life size for dinosaurs, and made a lot of museum exhibits and whatnot. I had worked on a couple of exhibit things with Hall Train, but I heard that John Conway worked there years before I did.
The lab gets around.
Yeah, absolutely. That's paleo art, right? Everyone is like just tangentially related.
Well, that's just paleontology in general, I think.
Yeah, that's more what I meant. Yeah.
It's a weird industry to be part of.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, leave it to the Australian to ask the hard question. There's been a couple of posts, especially on Facebook and everything, of very strange troll-like behaviour of just because, especially towards like the women in paleontology. Mm-hmm. So, is this something you've it sounds like you've found your place at the ROM, and they've been very supportive and inclusive. Right. But have you come across a lot of that in other locations, or?
I've definitely seen a lot of instances of trolling and sexism in paleontology. I've definitely scuffled a few times online, but I wouldn't say that, People will be awful under.
Speak for itself.
Yeah, people will always be awful under the guise of anonymity. That is something that I've learned a few too many times, I have to say. But especially as a YouTube presenter, I can't read the comments without getting enraged about one thing or another about somebody's bigoted opinions. So I really need to kind of step away from that. That's also one of the reasons why I don't participate too actively online. I'd figure my sanity is not really worth it, and I don't really need to justify myself to anyone. I have a professional job, and I'm just doing what I want to do. So I try not to worry myself too much about it, but I would certainly defend anyone who was facing that themselves.
Wise words, like it's so easy to say, just don't read it, but often you can't help but read it. It's in a specific place. Or
can I give you an example? Because this particular question is very relevant to me today, because I was scrolling through the comments of my YouTube show, and the most recent episode that we made was about moray eels. So there I am, I'm presenting about scientific facts about moray eels, and I'm doing an illustration that's recorded during the episode. And one of the comments that I came across amongst lots of support was this. It said, "I don't like hearing women narrate these sort of videos. I find it inappropriate. You sound like a young woman who should be having a family and not narrating this sort of thing. So I don't like this." So I was so bewildered by this comment that I ended up sharing it amongst my friends just to, I don't know, in a way I had to laugh about it, but it's also really disconcerting that people actually have this opinion. And if someone has this opinion, it means that they're supported by some sort of community that also bolsters this. So, there's lots of issues with people forming these crazy opinions online and then finding like-minded, other like-minded people who back up these ideas. And, it's like a poison that spreads, really. So this is one of the things that I deal with on occasion. And I know I'm not the only one.
Oh, it's like everyone's entitled to their opinions, but as they say, opinions are like arseholes. Everyone's got one, and we don't want to see anybody. So just keep it to yourself. But that specific one is so bizarre. I'm not sure if you can quantify it as trolling, because it's just so strange. It's almost like somebody's come from the 15th century and like, women, like, why aren't you in the kitchen making me bread?
That's exactly the impression I had. I'm like, I'm pretty sure that wherever you're coming from, you're probably not allowed to have a computer.
Yeah, or have you got the computer away from your wife at the moment and you're just releasing some inner turmoil that you're going through at the moment, and you're just putting it on somebody else.
So bad.
Well,
luckily, I haven't seen this kind of insanity in Paleoart, so, people, it's the only kind of trolling that people really do in groups of Paleoart that I've seen. It's more just pertaining to people getting very attached to certain ideas and refusing to let them go. People are willing to fight for those things for some reason, and I don't really get it. Like, you can prefer dinosaurs with scales, it's fine. Don't fight anybody over it. It's silly.
Like the classic, they're not scary if they've got feathers.
Oh yeah, that's a classic.
Get emu sometime and tell me they're not scary with feathers.
Exactly.
Lads, have you got anything else?
I think I'll tag Mike in if he's got anything.
On that last note, I mean, have they not heard of the Me Too movement and stuff? I would hope that people actually in the paleontology field are educated enough that
I would think so.
Run into this too much.
Yeah.
And I'm not naming this person that left you that note.
I mean, this is the wild west of YouTube that I was talking about. Not the paleontology community, thank goodness.
Oh yeah, and you hit the nail on the head about anonymity. I can't talk tonight. And
bloody Californians, spit it out.
Yeah, darn California accent. They think they can say whatever they want because you're never going to see them face to face, and they would never dream in a million years of talking to you like that if you were looking at them eye to eye.
Right. I'd say the paleontology community has come a long way from what it used to be. Everyone knows that it was once and has made a long way from being the old boys club that it once was.
Yeah,
so,
I should hope so.
There's a lot of women in paleontology these days, and they're finally starting to get their due respect. And I'm really glad to see all the effort that's still being put into that and raising that equality.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I hear a lot from people that aren't too happy about dinosaurs having feathers that do my magazine a lot.
Right.
Yeah. And then I see a lot of the trolling on the internet for the whole evolution thing too, of course. So.
Oh no.
So I'm up against all that.
I mean, they're subscribed to that to your magazine, and yet they still don't believe in evolution. That's
It happens.
Scratching my head on that one.
I actually had to do a school group one time for a dinosaur tour for a 7th day Adventist class.
Oh.
And they asked me beforehand, can you just not say the word evolution? You can talk about the process, you can do everything, just don't say the actual word.
Oh my goodness.
So I did the tour, an hour tour, said it every way I could think of except the actual E word. Right. And at the end, they were lovely. They got up and the teacher went, okay, everyone, thank you, Phil. Thank Phil for the lovely tour he just did, and remember, everything he just said is a lie.
Oh, really?
And
that was the conclusion?
Yeah. Well, I was standing there going, you couldn't have said that once you got back on the bus.
Wow.
That's amazing. Oh, it's more sad than it is amazing, but...
Well, I train a lot of tour guides, and one of the things I give them that as an example and say, the point is don't argue with an adult. You'll never change the mind of an adult. Just get your point across, get your information across, because kids are listening and they're smart. And kids, they'll watch one adult explaining and giving reasons why, and they'll have another adult with their fingers in their ears going, la, 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 la.
Right.
So, just be aware of your audience.
Several of them with your presentation.
Oh, I missed that, sorry?
I'm sure that you got through to several of them with your presentation.
Well, that's what I like to think is, kids are pretty smart, and they'll start to question things, and it's like rust. You get in there, and it'll just eat away at them and change them forever.
Mm-hmm.
I do have one question for you, Danielle. First, I'd like to say anonymity. Thank you. But
you just Googled it.
When you get to paint the take for instance the Zool, but the main painting of a new discovery, how does that come about usually? Maybe it's never the same way, I don't know, but that's very impressive. That's something that you'll always have.
Oh, thank you. I guess the process of trying to reconstruct something and starting a new painting of something, I always like to start it with, a long sit-down discussion with the researchers that are involved. And, that'll often lead to questions that maybe they haven't even considered because I have to represent it in some way. They might not have thought of, what shape the pupil would be on an oviraptorid, but I might still have to paint a pupil of some shape. And I want to try and get it as accurate to what they want as possible. So I ask these weird questions, and they sit there scratching their head and say, I don't know, because there's no way to know.
Yeah, right.
So often, we'll come to these conclusions together based on either what we think makes most sense, inferring on, what kind of behavior would possibly lead to certain features. For example, even color scheme, that has a lot to do with the environment that a animal lives in, or even the kind of niche that they're trying to live in. So one funny story, I guess, would be trying to reconstruct Zool was really interesting because the the researchers working on it, it was both Dr. Victoria Arbour and Dr. David Evans. They were co-authors on this paper, but that meant that I had to ask two people what they wanted it to look like. And I can tell you that they're both very different people. Very great, but very different.
And I can tell you it's tough to have any two paleontologists agree on anything.
If there's two things that they could not agree upon, it was color. Victoria was pretty adamant about wanting something fairly flamboyant and exciting and colorful, whereas David was more in the camp of wanting it to look fairly conservative and safe and, well, let's be honest, brown. The safest color of all is brown.
Right.
But instead, you know, I went through about 20 different iterations and like quickly sketched color palettes, and we spent a whole week just going back and forth, and finally we agreed upon something. And in the end, they were both so fed up with arguing with each other that they said that I could just pick my favorite and go for it.
We give up.
Yeah, I was pretty happy with that result.
That's nice. Yeah. And what about Wendy Ceratops?
Oh, Wendy Ceratops. The color palette for that one, I mean, I was working with David, and like I said, he's a little bit more of a fan of you know, more conservative colors, and but we did discuss the fact that, you know, Wendy Ceratops has one heck of a very magnificent frill. Like, it is definitely a display structure, and one thing that he definitely wanted to note with me was that, you know, display structures, they're meant to be seen. So vibrant colors were definitely worth going forward with that, but we still wanted to make it look kind of believable. So we went with like a nice warm neutral color palette, but still threw in some nice vibrant believable colors that could be present in keratin of scales. So we went with like a nice creams and oranges and browns, make it look striking but still conservative.
Right. And the fossil was good enough that you didn't have to guess too much on that, maybe? I can't remember. There's so many ceratopsids out there.
Yeah. So Wendy Ceratops is a dinosaur that was found in a bone bed, and the whole bone bed was of Wendy Ceratops. So really, this dinosaur is described based off of like a ton of different individuals that were ripped apart and strewn about and collected as just a bunch of disassociated and disarticulated bones. So we had a lot of, you know, multiples of the same bones of different sizes. Like, there were cute little babies and there were full-size individuals. In the end, that we found enough pieces of the frill that we were able to reconstruct what the appearance of the entire frill would look like through, you know, mirroring from one side to the other and comparing different pieces of the same bone and whatnot. So lots of parietal and lots of squamosal, and we had a clear view of what that frill looked like. I did the reconstruction for that as well.
I would think that would be almost better than having one good fossil, was to have a whole bunch of different ones that you could kind of...
I think so too, because then you're not just totally relying on one individual. Because like one individual doesn't, just because it looks a certain way doesn't mean that it was developmentally perfect, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, cool. Thanks. I'll let Greg take over, and I'll take a break.
All right.
Okay, yeah. I will happily take the reins here for a wee bit here. Alright, this first question here, you may have answered part of it. If you want to go more in depth about this animal specifically, the question is thusly. Some of your Paleoart has become quite renowned, especially your reconstruction of Zool. And like, how did you get to be the one to be the first to depict this genus of ankylosaurid?
Okay, well, the fact that the ROM acquired this particular fossil just happened to be my luck. Since I am the scientific illustrator in Paleo here, it fell upon me to work on this project with the researchers who were going to be studying it. So this has been kind of like a several part project over the past couple of years, because we received this acquired fossil in a few different parts, and that was the skull and the tail and the body block. The skull came to us already prepared, so it was already ready for photography and illustration and study. The tail, however, it was still, it was only in kind of a semi-prepared state. So that one required a lot of preparation and time to be ready. So I got to work on the skull first, and then do work on the tail second. At that point, that's what the describing paper was based on. It was just those two parts, because those are kind of the most important features when describing ankylosaurids. As for the body is actually still being prepared. It's in the last week of preparation before it gets mounted and shipped over to the ROM, and it's going to join the ROM exhibit here. But I've been following very closely on how that body block gets prepared, and I've been making diagrams and reconstructions based off of all that progress. It's been a little bit tough, because over this past year I've had to make these murals and all kinds of graphics about Zool without knowing exactly what the body looked like, and that's been a real challenge. First they prepared the belly side, and that ended up being absolutely beautiful, but when they flipped it over and started to prepare the back, no one was really anticipating that it would be perfect. But it is, essentially. The whole back has all of the skin and all of the keratin on top of that skin. So every scute and piece of armor has this just beautiful definition, and it's going to look like the back of a dragon. Just wait until you see that thing. It's pretty incredible.
Yep, that's a look into the mindset of how you do a piece, if I do say so myself.
But yeah, so my reconstructions for the mural that concerns Zool, they had to keep changing throughout the year as they progressed on that preparation, because more and more details about its armor started to get revealed. So that's been a very back and forth process of working on Zool.
Okay, that's pretty cool, very insightful, right? Next one is some general advice. What are some tips and advice you would give somebody that's looking to become a scientific illustrator, or just doing a scientific art, or just art in general?
Okay. Well, I'd say that anyone who's really interested in getting into scientific illustration or paleo art, just draw. Keep on drawing. Try and draw something that has so many details that you go a little squirrely. It'll push you on to the next level and just develop your eye for detail. Don't ignore the little features. Try and learn as much anatomy as you can. Buy yourself some nice dissection books, or animal anatomy for artists books. Those are fantastic. I have several of those that I learned a lot from back in college. But animal anatomy is so important. A lot of people might not realize it, but we don't know exactly what the musculature would have been on dinosaurs. There's a lot of evidence for muscle scars and attachment points, but still the best inference that we can make is still based off of animals that are alive today. So do your best to learn that anatomy of current animals and apply that knowledge to what doesn't exist anymore. The second point I'd like to make is don't be afraid to reach out to scientists. Today is a great time to be able to actually contact people who work on these things. If you're curious about what kind of plants might have existed in a certain area at a certain time, reach out to a paleobotanist. So many scientists are available now, either via email or through Twitter. Twitter's awesome these days for that. You can have conversations with people, and I can guarantee you they'll be excited to talk to you.
And yeah, in this age of social media, it's only a message or an email away to contact a scientist to get their advice and input on reconstructing a prehistoric animal.
Yeah, exactly. You might just have to poke them a few times.
And those paleobotanists are a bunch of lonely people, so. I'm just being.
What you say.
Yeah, the most renowned botanist that I know in paleontology is the wife of Dr. Curry, Eva Kopolis.
I was about to say that too. Yeah, she's wonderful.
Okay, my last question for the time being. This is about if you've ever done any old school dino reconstruction before going to your more accurate stance. This question is, was there any time in your early life prior to becoming a full-time paleoartist that you drew dinosaurs in the old school tail dragger style of Charles Darwin or Jed Neck burying before eventually switching over to the more accurate horizontal counterbalancing stance?
Well, I mean, I was definitely scribbling dinosaurs and giving them all kinds of terrible and impossible posture. But I'm sure that it would be something that I can't exactly liken to Burien or Knight. I mean, I was a kid and I couldn't have known any better. I was drawing and emulating what I could see, and at the time it was some pretty old school Paleoart. But as soon as I started taking it a little more seriously, I would try and always keep up with what the most current thoughts were on Paleoart and reconstructing animals. And I just don't think I could ever compare myself to them. I made a lot of bad Paleoart, though, that's for sure.
Bad art, you say, like, how levels of bad we talk about?
I mean, I was a kid once, Give me that much.
Yeah, I know.
I can still scribble on a napkin,
Yeah, there's some young artists that I've heard who were, even at a young age, were prodigies.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm not surprised to hear that.
So, okay, here I'll let the crazy Aussie go next here.
How'd I get stuck with that name?
Wow.
I guess we're all a bit, well, we come from Australia, that probably does it. I have a question in two parts, and you've kind of already answered it, but is there one style of animal you prefer to work on than others? Like, are you purely, you love dinosaurs, you just would do dinosaurs all the time, or do you hate doing mammals because there's so much hair, or you like doing trilobites because they're easy? And basically you just look at the trilobite and there it is and you just draw it. Is there a style that you prefer? And the second part is there something you hate drawing, like, or hate animating, like scales or
Oh my god. Okay, I'll be honest, it's pretty painful to draw scales for hours or days on end. But I do love the animals so much that, it just becomes worth it, and I get in the zone, and I just get into repetitive motion, and, I come out of a funk later, maybe days later, and suddenly I have a scaly animal. Let's see.
I'm asking just because we had an artist who used to work for Disney at the museum, and he did a 60-foot mural, and a mammal mural, and he had to do grass. And he did months worth of grass, and it drove him insane. So I'm always aware there must be something out there that you just so monotonously have to constantly redo that you're just like sick of doing it.
Well, last year I had to reconstruct a new polychaete worm that was described from the Burgess Shale. And this thing had so many, it was covered in chaetae, which are like, long pointy needle-like hairs at the end of their little feet. And this animal had, I don't know, somewhere in the there was a number, and I had to know the number at the time. I've clearly erased that for a reason. It had somewhere around 700 chaetae, and I had to illustrate it in such a way that it was believable. And
so you could just cut and paste.
Not really. I mean, to a certain extent, I cut and pasted some of them, but I had to make sure that they were all moving away in space at just the right angle, because the feet, the way that it ambulates around, they're angling off at different angles, and there's just a certain pattern with which that it moves that I had to actually try and reconstruct it through space at the right angle again and again and again and again. So I lost my mind a little bit with that. So things with a lot of spikes, that's tough. Or,
So it's
or like very specific hairs. Ugh.
It's one of those things where, you know, I'm sure you get this at dinner parties, like, that sounds like a fantastic job. You must have so much fun. And they don't realise, no, it's actually a four-letter word. It's still work. I still have to go and do something very monotonous often.
Yep. I mean, I love what I do, but obviously, you know, there's a lot of stress involved as well, and trying to make sure that I can make everyone's deadlines work for everyone. It's not easy sometimes. You know, I bring a lot of work home, and I work a lot of late nights. So, not to actually complain or anything. Just
No. I wasn't fishing for a complaint. Just like it was one of those things that I like to ask people because I'm aware that there's something you don't think about often is the monotony of some jobs.
True.
And we got anything from Mike? We've killed him.
Mike?
Oh my lord, he's dead.
Oh, what have you done?
Well, you know those Californians, they wilt in the sun. Oh, he's back. Oh, we were saying nothing but nice things.
Oh yeah.
Well, they've asked everything I could think of. So good night, everybody.
All right.
No, I'm just kidding.
We all got excited for a second.
Well, that's how it is. Good night, everybody. Did you have you talked much about your schooling, your art schooling? And how about any favorite artists that are not paleo artists?
Oh, geez, that's a really good question. Okay, I'll talk about my schooling for a little bit. I went to Sheridan College after high school. I decided to take a first-year general art fundamentals course because I wasn't too sure whether I wanted to go into animation bachelor degree or the illustration bachelor degree. So I spent my first year making some portfolios for both, and I figured that my skill would determine where I best belonged. It's kind of weird because I got a higher score on my animation portfolio, but by that time I had already gotten a bit of a glimpse into what animation was all about, and I decided it wasn't going to be for me. I didn't really want to be a cog in a factory, you could say. Not to paint animation in a bad light, it just wasn't really what I was looking for. So I did get into illustration, and I had a choice once I got into that program. It was either I could go into interpretive illustration or into the scientific and technical side of illustration. So I knew already that I wanted to apply art to science, but at that point in my life. So I was really happy to get into the technical and scientific side of things. And that's where I completed my degree, and through that program I got my opportunity to get in at the ROM, and it's been that ever since. What was the second part to that question again? Sorry.
But Sheridan College, is that in Toronto or?
Oh yeah, it's just outside of Toronto in a city called Oakville.
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. What artists have affected you that aren't paleo artists? You're talking about stippling earlier, so of course I thought of Impressionists. I love Impressionist painters.
I love Impressionist painters as well. That's tough because I like a lot of art that has nothing to do with anything paleo related. I'm a big fan of fantasy art, to be honest. I'm a big fantasy nerd, definitely, a big Tolkien kid, and a lot of artists who've gone on to do that are still today some of my favorites. Even a lot of artists who make concept designs for games and whatnot, like I admire a lot of them. And even comic book artists who, I still follow today. in my house here, I have 2 pieces by an artist named James Jean, who made comic book covers, and he's a big one to me. It's very I guess whimsical, you could say. And yeah, I'm a little bit lost. I always get a little bit stumped when I'm asked what my favorite things are.
Yeah, no, that's okay. And I know you like sci-fi stuff too, and you said that has helped contribute to your ideas for like a lot of how the birds of shale creatures looked and stuff.
Absolutely, yep.
And it's amazing how many of those guys are fans of prehistoric stuff. Like just through the Facebook page, we've had a lot of big-time comic artists who are actually members. Because they're like, it's all part of the same sort of art world, I guess, fantasy art world.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And of course, there's a huge crossover between dinosaurs and sci-fi, so they go hand in hand pretty well.
Sorry, just a second.
No, that's quite all right. Greg's got some good questions for you, I see, coming up, so I'll hand him the baton.
Yep, alrighty. Jumping back onto the base, I will start off with my first question. This one's, it's another favorite topic, but it's a simple one. Alright, what is your favorite dinosaur or any, prehistoric animal, for that matter?
That's really tough. That's a really tough question. It often varies based on what I'm working on at the time. Can't help but love your own subjects, right? You get kind of attached. One favorite that I can't seem to get away from, though, is Pachycephalosaurus in general. They've always fascinated me a little more than other dinosaurs, and I think that they're especially interesting because we seem to know so little about them and understand very little about how they lived or looked in any sort of way. I mean, there's that size bias, right? And the only things that really get preserved are their skull roofs, and the rest of it is so rare to find that it's difficult to really compare it amongst itself. Like there's such a small data set that you can't make too many inferences. But also, like, what we do have are some incredible evidence of some kind of behavior that is just terribly fascinating. The fact that we always get these skulls with pock marks and divots, and it just says that they're doing something with those skull roofs. It might be fighting, it might be defending themselves, it might be interspecific or intraspecific combat. I feel like there's just so many questions around them that make them really fascinating. And if I'm going to be completely honest, I really love them because they look like dinosaurs. All those amazing horns adorning their heads. Did I say dinosaurs? I meant dragons. They are dinosaurs, duh. Yes, but they look like dragons. And, the fantasy nerd in me just kind of loves that and can't let go of that imagination of them.
Especially when you look at Dracorex.
Yes, exactly.
Or not, as depending on where you stand.
Yeah, Dracorex / all the others.
Baby Packy.
Yeah, the whole clumping hypothesis or not.
Yeah, I think that there's a fair argument to be made that some of the specimens that we know of that are called different things, be it Dracorex or Stygimoloch or Pachycephalosaurus, some of those probably do belong together in the same genus. And but there is also the argument that all of these specimens were not found on the same level. They're not from the same strata. So they could obviously be, different stages of evolution through time, and they're going to look a little bit different. But I think that there's some pretty good arguments to be made that they're more closely related than initially postulated.
Especially when you look at some species, the more advanced species, their juvenile forms look like the previous form that they evolved from.
Yeah, that's right.
So even though it may well be a juvenile Pachy, there's probably something that looks exactly like it a couple of million years earlier.
Yeah.
Along the lines of what's your favorite dinosaur, we always ask, where would you go if you had a time machine to go back? And I guess with you, you'd probably say the Cretaceous, but you might be interested in going back to the Burgess Shale too. I don't know.
Oh, you actually, yeah, you're spot on with that answer. I would like to see both. Although, if I were to go to the Burgess Shale, I think I would like to view it from a smaller size than I currently am. I would also like to be minuscule and experience them from, their size, so that I could really appreciate what they are. Of course, that would mean that it would be imminent death.
It would get
but
scary.
yeah, probably, but it'd be pretty incredible.
Yeah.
But yes, Cretaceous otherwise.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. Most people would say Cretaceous just so you could see a living Tyrannosaurus Rex.
That's me.
Some of us are Australians here. We might want to go back to the Ediacaran.
Oh, wow. That's, I don't know. I don't know if that's when I'd want to go. That'd be kind of boring, don't you think?
Yeah. Oh, very much so.
Man. So, look at those sponges go.
And if I had to be honest, two other places I'd love to travel back in time to see would be, Ice Age North America, and also Ice Age Australia, because both of them had pretty cool wildlife. Ice Age America, basically the Serengeti, and Australia was just the land of everything that can kill you. And Australia,
it still is.
Still that?
And
yeah,
still
it's still
today.
just today.
yeah, but it was 10 times worse than the Ice Age. I mean,
It's perfectly safe. We only lose about 50% of our population to the wildlife every year. What are you talking about?
like circa 100,000 years ago, we had 23 7-meter-long monitor lizards and terrestrial crocodiles of comparable size. You had marsupial lions with bolt cutter type teeth.
Those are
That was deadly.
The megafauna.
Yeah, just to prove that sucker actually ate meat. That's what we'd like to see. Like,
oh yeah,
Dilacoleo being a herbivore, ridiculous.
So crazy. Well, I mean, that's one of the things that still currently fascinates me about Pachycephalosaurus is that no one really knows what they were eating. They had some pretty carnivorous-looking teeth in the front of their skulls there. So
somebody was bringing that up at the Field Museum the other day. Actually, I don't remember who it was, but saying, there's not a strong suggestion, but there's definitely a suggestion that
there is.
Perhaps they were omnivorous at least, or the grizzly bear of their day. Less tree climbing, though.
Right.
Right.
I don't know about grizzlies. I mean, they're not that scary. But...
You what? Bears are terrifying.
Bears scare me.
Bears should scare you.
Yeah, they do.
I don't think they're real. I'm yet to see one. I've been living in the US for in the Northern America for 4.5 years, and everyone keeps, whenever you're out in the field or something, they're like, "Oh, there was just a bear here before." No, you're all
sure
lying.
There was.
It's like us talking about drop bears. They're just they're either animatronic in the zoos. They're not real. You're just making it all up to bring the tourists.
One of these days.
Yeah, that's my rant over.
Drop bears, oh my.
Drop bears.
Have you seen any moose yet?
They're huge.
Yeah. They're also the most dangerous animal in Canada.
But they eat cheese. And elephants are scared of them.
Oh yeah.
Oh, you mean moose. Sorry, it's the accent.
Oh, wait, what did you hear?
Yeah, what did you hear?
Yeah, I'm like, what's so scary about a mice?
Oh!
Well, it's
Pieces of pizzas.
It's actually kind of true. Rodents actually do scare elephants.
There you go.
Is that true? I thought that was just a myth.
I think they tested it on Mythbusters, and that actually was somewhat accurate, I think.
Oh, wow. Huh.
Is it like cats and cucumbers?
Well, for cats, I think there's an explanation for why they're scared of cucumbers.
Was there cats?
Well, it's basically them being surprised.
They don't like their veggies, so...
What I think it is actually it's because it's an unfamiliar object being placed behind them when they're not aware, and then they see it, they flip out because it's some foreign object they've never seen before.
Mm-hmm.
I honestly think that if you looked at it from their perspective, as in literally, they'd look like a snake.
Yeah,
Yeah.
snake crossing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Us
when you're that
mammals, we do have a naturally ingrained fear of snakes.
Yeah.
So I'm sure they're not immune to that either.
And I'm not sure you saw the news that all the Australians are actually being told at the moment to keep their cats indoors, which they should anyway. You never
They
let
should.
that out.
Yeah.
Because they're all being eaten by snakes because it's so warm at the moment. The snakes are hyperactive. Like they're
Holy
just
crap.
Wow.
running around everywhere eating everyone's cats.
Really? That's a thing? Australia, what is wrong with you? Okay. Wow.
Okay.
When did this interview fall apart?
Did it fall apart or did it fall together?
There's nothing wrong with having fun here, guys.
We're insulting Australians now. Oh, we
This
did
is the
that
no
with the
fun
kitty.
zone.
Never mind.
You didn't call us New Zealanders, so you can't insult us.
Alright, next
Poor
question
cuties.
here, guys. Alright, next
All
one
right,
is,
go ahead.
what is it about, dinosaurs that you find fascinating? Why do you think they have such, why the public as a whole has such an interest in these, creatures?
That is a very good question. I feel like dinosaurs are kind of like the fantasy animals that really existed. So many people love the idea of constructing an idea of something and sharing that culturally. It's like fantasy creatures, they've been passed down again and again through history and have been reiterated through these themes and these stories. But no one really has any solid idea of what they look like. Dinosaurs are like the closest thing that we have in reality to fantasy creatures. Like these are the dragons that are almost tangible, but just not quite. I feel like animals. Kind of fill you with the same sense of wonder. And the thing about prehistoric animals is that they're impossible to reconstruct accurately, no matter how close we get with new studies. Some aspects of these animals will just forever be left to the imagination. That might be, who knows, that could be fat deposits, it could be the color on their skin, it could be patterns, but most of all, I would say it's their behavior that we just can't quite grasp, and probably never will. And I think that those questions, the fact that they constantly get asked again and again, like, what were these animals? We're so close, and we're always going to be just a little too far. So we're going to keep asking, and we're going to stay interested, because we're never going to be really satisfied with the answer. And I think that's what really makes people love dinosaurs, because we're never really going to know.
I also think there's something for the empowerment of dinosaurs, because I've been doing museum education for a while now, and the one thing I can think of that really is parents teach their kids everything.
Yeah.
Dinosaurs are the first thing that a kid gets to make their own, and then teach parents. And that's why you hear it all the time going, oh no, mother, it's not a blah blah blahsaurus, it's a blah 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 blahsaurus rex.
That is a really good point. I was one of those kids too. I wouldn't doubt that you guys were all those kids as well.
I think all kids are those kids at that age.
Yeah, I think you're totally right there.
So yeah, it's really empowering, for a kid that's theirs. They get to own it.
Mm-hmm. But also, as a kid, to imagine something so beyond the scope of animals that exist today, like something so much more gigantic, so much more deadly looking, something just, that would look totally impossible compared to what we can actually see in a reference book. And be told that these things actually existed, like these gigantic creatures that were just thundering across the land. Like that has to inspire some sense of wonder into people.
I think what you're saying here is dinosaurs are our cucumbers.
Oh, crap.
That we turn around and there's the cucumber on the ground. We're like, oh, look at that.
You heard it here first, folks. Dinosaurs our cucumbers.
You can leave it up to me to make something so succinct.
Well, I mean, some of them probably looked like giant cucumbers.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Sauropods, giant cucumbers on legs.
See, you're all laughing, and now you're thinking about it. It's getting into your brain. It's permeating.
I kind of want to get some cucumbers and toothpicks and make a little sculpture.
There you go. Yeah.
It'll be fun. Show it to my cat. See what she does.
Going to be the next internet craze.
What if I show it to my cat?
Cucumber sauropods.
Yeah.
Could Pachycephalosaurus bang heads together?
Ooh, start a fight.
I think they did. I think they did. But I mean, what is that worth? I mean, that's an opinion, but you know, there's a lot of contention there for a reason. They were doing something with those heads. I mean, they were hitting something with their heads because of all the damage that is, you know, evidenced in the specimens that have been collected. Unless they were sustaining terrible injuries some other way, maybe via predation, then getting their injuries infected and then ending up with a giant abscess on their heads. Like, there's a lot of damage on these specimens, and the ROM has a really good collection that people are working on right now and trying to answer this question. I'm pretty excited to see the results of this research.
Very good.
It's going to be a couple years before we see any results. Maybe we'll have an answer.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's a bit like Brontosaurus possibly coming back. Old things become new again.
Again and again.
Right.
Yep, what was old?
That's why there's always going to be work in Paleoart.
Yeah.
Yes, very...
You better hope so.
I do hope so.
Okay, now I will be following up the question about dinosaurs and fascinating with a related follow-up. This is about the inspiration for certain monsters of mythology. Do you subscribe to the hypothesis that one possible inspiration for, you know, the legends of, you know, dragons, griffins, cyclops, and other mythological monsters might have been the result of ancient people's discoveries of dinosaurs and other assorted prehistoric animals like mammoths, mastodons, etc.?
Oh, 100%. I think that fossils have played a part in mythology and in history way more than has ever been documented. I mean, there's so many examples of, you know, skeletons and fossils that can be compared in some way to some kind of mythological beast. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. Paleontology as a science isn't that old, but fossils have been eroding out of hillsides for as long as time has carried on. So, I mean, if you were an ancient tribe and you came across like a Protoceratops eroding out of the sand, and you saw this four-legged, sturdy-looking beast. It's got a tail, it's got four legs, and it has a big, long beak. Big, strong beak, kind of like an eagle. Would you not think that maybe that was a griffin? You know, would you not try and imagine what this beast would have looked like in life and use what reference you had around you? A big, strong lion body, a big eagle head, and there you have a griffin. I think that it's just logical for people to be imagining these things from so long ago. One that I particularly love is the Mammoth Skull, like you mentioned, and that being interpreted as a one-eyed human or humanoid. So, you know, then you end up with a Cyclops. And if you tried to add flesh to a Mammoth Skull, you could pretty much make it look like a Cyclops if you're being liberal with your technique, you know? Like, there's a lot of really obvious inferences that you can make with these things.
There are actually some burials in Europe that they claim to have found that were of the heroes of lore, and they were actually maybe not mammoths, but definitely elephants
being
placed out in a human their body shape is very much like a human when you're laid out like a human.
Oh, yes, I have read about that.
Yeah, so there's some evidence for it.
And when you think about it, I'd say that society today is way less familiar to what skeletons look like than what ancient people must have been, right? Because everything that we deal with has been handed off and processed, and we get to see the end result, which is, you know, generally it's just a piece of meat in a package. But, you know, early people, they had to process their hunt, and they had to deflesh things, and they dealt with death more directly, and they definitely would have known a skeleton when they saw one coming out of a hill.
Also, we kind of forget that they didn't write their history down. They told their history through their stories around the campfire. So if you're, especially, I always go back to the Australian Aborigines that have been in Australia for roughly 60,000 years. So they saw all the megafauna. And so even though those animals had died out, they're still saying, don't go down near the waterhole because there's things in there that are going to jump out and eat you. And even though they may have not have seen one in 10 generations, they had seen them 20 generations ago, so they're still telling that story.
Yeah, and then the fisherman's tale becomes the sea dragon's tale. And, you know, every time it gets told, it gets changed a little bit and more elaborated on and more impressive. And yeah. Oh, have I lost you?
Oh, no, sorry.
Oh.
It suddenly all went quiet. I'm like, my Lord.
I'm still here.
It's, the Cyclops is coming.
Yeah, and speaking of the Cyclops, the skulls of elephants, the opening in the skull where the trunk comes out, to anyone who wasn't familiar with elephants in life, some people might have mistook that as a single giant eye.
Right.
The Cyclops. But there's a bit of real life twist here. There's a sort of toxin of some sort that was found in the soil around certain parts of Greece, and that caused a birth deformity in some babies that caused them to be born with only a single deformed eye, like an actual cyclops.
Oh my. Wow.
It's not like the Greeks were known for drinking a lot and telling stories, so...
Yeah, there are some developmental, you know, deformities that happen in animals, and they'll be born with one eye. I've seen images of cats with one eye. It's pretty disturbing, but it happens.
I think there's a whole display at the Paris Natural History Museum. It's got some amazing deformities on display.
Oh, I love that stuff. It's fascinating.
And for runners, I think this condition is called cyclopia.
I believe that.
Sounds like something you're trying to eradicate from your lawn. I've had an outbreak of cyclopia, so I've got to use the weed to get rid of it.
Call Kimlon.
Okay, shift away from the...
Yeah, you're regretting inviting me now, aren't you?
But
let's move on.
Alright, to get back on track here, alright, I'll go with my last question I had in the chat here before I let somebody else take over. Alright, how many natural history museums have you been to overall? Are there any that you want to check out but you just haven't had the luxury of time to do so for whatever reason?
I actually made a list for this question because I probably wouldn't have remembered off the top of my head. So the ones that I have been to, there's the Science North in Sudbury, Royal Ontario Museum, obviously. Royal Ontario Museum was actually the first museum that I got to go to that had dinosaurs, and I gotta say, I was really young when I first visited Toronto to see that, and it changed me in a lot of ways. It brought me all the way back here. So, let's see. I've been to the Museum of Nature in Ottawa, the Natural History Museum of Los Angeles in California, the Museum for Naturkunde in Berlin, the Perot Museum of Nature in Dallas, the Natural History Museum of Utah in Salt Lake City. I've been to the T-Rex Discovery Center in East End, Saskatchewan. Been to the Black Hills Institute in South Dakota, and of course the Royal Tyrrell Museum in Drumheller. There's definitely a lot that I would still like to visit, and despite my interests, I've kind of missed a lot of the bigger the big and some consider best museums in the world. So there's a lot on that list. For example, there's the Smithsonian in Washington, the American Museum of Natural History in New York, the Field Museum in Chicago. I've yet to make it down there.
Yeah, it's all right.
And the Carnegie Museum, and of course the Natural History Museum in London, England. So still quite a list, and I'll get there eventually. But until then, I gotta hold on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there are so many museums that I really want to go check out. The American Museum of Natural History, that's the next big one on my bucket list to go check out. The Field was the first one that I actually managed to knock off my bucket list in 2016.
Oh yeah.
I was honestly spellbound when I first saw Sue in the old hall at the Field. I was like I was kneeling to an ancient goddess of death. So I had to pay my respects when I first seen the place.
Yeah, you're not wrong. Definitely some kind of god or goddess of death, that's for sure.
If you go to New York, though, you try and go on a bit of a cloudy day. It's a little bit frustrating in the fact that there's so much glass in there that if it's a real bright sunny day and they've got open like skylights above you, the reflections will drive you insane.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so my thing is always try and go on a cloudy day.
Okay, that's really good to know. Thanks for the tip.
That's a problem I run into at zoos all the time with certain exhibits. Okay, and the Carnegie, that's the museum I got to check out a few years back. It's easily one of the absolute finest I've ever been to, and it's the place where the holotype of Tyrannosaurus Rex is on display.
And it's so big. Like, it's enormous. I couldn't believe how big the place was.
It is well laid out.
Can you see it all in a day?
Yeah,
or do you need several?
Absolutely.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah, there's a lot of museums you can't, but
Yeah.
I can't think of any. The Field Museum is definitely one that you can't do in a day, really. Like, you can do the natural history side of it easily enough, but
Right.
like, then you go into the Ancient Americas thing, and that's just twice the size, and then you haven't even got into the zoological side. So it is
the Royal Ontario Museum is very much the same. Like you can't do it all in one day.
and it's
too
got all
many
those
subjects.
crazy angles. It's an amazing building.
Yep. Some people love it. Some people hate it.
Well, I also love the fact that depending on which way you walk, that you miss things. Like you walk one way and you walk past because of the angles of the roof or the walls. So you go down one hallway, you come back through that hallway, and you're seeing something new that you hadn't seen the first way.
That is true. Yeah. Yeah. There's some strange angles, that's for sure.
So hang on. So does that mean you like it or you don't like it?
I personally do like it. From an exhibit design standpoint, I think that it's a tough space to work with, and I think it's maybe a designer's nightmare.
Yep.
Especially with the fact that there's so much open window space that you can't really control how the light affects everything either.
I was going to say that's another one that if you get a real sunny day and the sun's on that side of the building, you see some things.
Yeah, it's a problem here too. But from a design standpoint, I really think that the crystal is an amazing feat of architecture. It really does look like a crystal that's growing out of an old rock. And I think that's super cool. I mean, it is a stunning thing to see, and it's a sight to behold, and it's worth a visit. But I just don't necessarily envy the people who have to organize the space within it.
Or clean the glass.
Yeah. Oh, geez. Yeah, I didn't even think about that one.
Yeah, pity the guys who have to do the upkeep on any museum exhibit. It can't be fun.
Guys, I'm going to have to kind of hit the dusty trail. But
That's all right.
I just want to say I wanted to thank you, Danielle, for taking the time for this. And,
well, thank you for having me. I mean, this has been pretty fun to just geek out with you guys, and ideally I'd be doing this all the time.
What would you think if I emailed you some questions later for an interview in my magazine too? Would that be all right?
Oh, I'd love to. Sure.
Yeah, I'll contact you first and give you a warning.
Sounds good.
But so my last question for you would be, what about the future? What do you hope happens to you? What do you think hope happens to paleontology without being ridiculous?
Oh, geez. Well, I mean, even since I started in 2011, I'd say the technology that's being used in paleontology has just been growing exponentially. And it's really interesting to see what kind of digital technologies are being used now. Like micro CTs are being used to analyze the actual cellular structure of fossils. And I think that is where everything is maybe heading now. It's all going to be developmental and comparative in terms of, cellular structure and tissue comparisons. And, the work that Mary Schweitzer is starting to do on discovering not necessarily DNA, but proteins that can be, identifying parts of DNA. I think that is really where the future of paleontology is going. And I clearly need to start learning some more digital techniques.
Yeah, right.
So I want to stay relevant. I'm always going to be able to draw and paint, but I also would like to be able to participate in this digital revolution. And even right now, I'm starting to learn how to section CT data. So, I mean, that's where our lab is going. And I have a feeling that most labs are probably moving that direction as well.
Yeah, we're all playing catch up, huh?
Yeah.
Technology is just so fast anymore.
Yep.
So what do you hope happens to you ideally, in your field? And I do have one more question after that too. What do you hope happens to you, say in the near future, Danielle?
Honestly, I would just like to, I hope that my job stays secure and that I can really just become a mainstay here at the ROM, because I love our lab. I love what we do. I love being a part of this process and being a member of this team. And if anything, I hope that I can continue to develop new skills and stay relevant. And
if you love your job, you never work a day of your life.
Oh, exactly.
Hey, what do you think about bringing prehistoric animals back to life, or even just recently extinct animals?
I think it's interesting to ask the question of, can we do it? And it's starting to look like, maybe there's certain animals that we can bring back
to a
certain extent.
Yeah,
it's a little bit crazy, right?
Yeah.
But it almost seems like the whole idea of doing it is entirely to satisfy our own curiosity, because I'm not sure that trying to restart a population and reintegrate that into the wild is something that really needs to be done right now. I don't think that the ecosystems and the environment will really benefit from any such thing. If anything, more focus should be spent on conserving what we do have, rather than trying to force something that's no longer a part of it back into it. I think that there's some danger there.
Well said, absolutely.
That being said,
DNA gets in the way.
Yeah. That being said, I do want to see a Chickenosaurus. I do have the curiosity.
Warner's retired now, though, so I don't know.
I know. Oh, there's people carrying on his research. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. Okay, gang. Thanks so much. I'll be in touch with Danielle. And thanks for letting us use your art in the magazine sometimes, too. That's been very nice.
Oh, I'm always happy to. Yeah, just whenever you want to, just let me know.
I'm going to hold you to that.
All right.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
See ya.
Bye, Mike. I'll see you on the next big special.
Can't wait.
So, Yeah.
I hate to say it, but I don't think I can stay much longer either.
I have only a few more. I only got a few questions left here in my document here. So I'll get those in the chat here and we'll knock them out of the park here.
Sounds good.
And before we wrap up, some Animalogic ones I'll probably think of as we go along. Alright, this first question here is about your stance on dinosaurs having lips or no lips. Question is, what is your stance on dinosaurs having lips or no lips in light of Gregory S. Paul's recently submitted Prehistoric Times article/study postulating that the teeth of dinosaurs may have been covered like gums like manta lizards in the previous issue of Prehistoric Times magazine?
I did read the article, and I think that he presents a lot of very good arguments for the case of lips on dinosaurs, on theropods especially. And, you know, that is also kind of the stance that I would take. I do reconstruct my theropods with lips and a fair amount of gum covering those teeth, so that these animals would be able to actually occlude their upper and lower jaws and preserve that moisture within their mouths. One of the cases that would actually be in favor of lips that was not discussed there is some research that Dr. Robert Rice is currently undergoing. He had presented on it, I think it was at SVP, not this year, but 2017, I believe. He's been researching how enamel actually disintegrates and wears away if it's not maintained with some level of moisture. And he's been testing this with a lot of different animals that are not just dinosaurs, but animals across all groups and families. It seems to be that if there isn't some kind of moisture maintaining the enamel, that enamel will break down. And so if you're looking at that, it makes a lot of sense when you look at crocs, for example. Their teeth are exposed and they do have enamel, but they're semi-aquatic and are often exposed to that water, so they're pretty okay with being maintained. And of course, he's testing a lot of the harder animals to really explore, because there are some mammals, for example, that have teeth that are exposed, like Chinese water deer or boar, and a lot of these animals, turns out, just don't have enamel on their teeth that are exposed on the outside. So if a tooth is exposed to air and it doesn't have enamel, then it doesn't really need to worry about wearing away that enamel. But dinosaurs, for example, people have been doing a lot of histological slices of dinosaur teeth of all kinds, and dinosaurs most definitely do have enamel on their teeth. And enamel is a structure that is pretty much the same across all animals. So the way that this type of structure is maintained is going to also be conserved if it's the same microstructure. So I would say that yes, dinosaurs probably had to maintain the moisture in their mouths based off of the study that he's doing. And what better way to do that than to have completely closed mouths, have those lips to completely hold them in and prevent that loss of moisture. It just makes a lot more sense in terms of like a biological biological energy conservation. It would be a lot of energy for the animal to have to constantly renew these teeth just for the sake of maintaining that enamel on the outside. And of course, dinosaurs lost their teeth all the time, but there's a certain degree at which that makes sense. Anyway, I'm kind of rambling at this point. But yes, I do think that they had tissue covering their teeth.
the degree of which that they may have had lip coverage is still somewhat debated among scientists, but this is one viewpoint that I can somewhat agree with to an extent. Now now we have another group of animals to discuss this, and that's saber-toothed cats. Where do you stand on the idea that some artists have of putting bulldog-style lip coverings on saber-toothed cats?
Well, that is an interesting question because it does look as though saber-toothed cats, their sabers themselves, they do have enamel on their outer structure. So that means that, either they had such a large amount of enamel that it just didn't break down, or they had something constantly keeping them hydrated. Maybe that meant that they drooled a bunch because they had big droopy lips, or maybe they had great big coverings that drooped all the way down over it. But we just don't really know. I don't think that the tooth histology has been too extensive with them. But I'll be honest, I do not have the answer for this because I have not delved too deep into saber cat anatomy and research. So I'm not really gospel with my knowledge on them. So don't take their word for it. But I think that like maybe some conservative amount of lip cover would make sense. Considering they had a mouth full of sharp teeth and they were their primary tools, they probably couldn't be too big and floppy and get in the way, otherwise they would be just constantly injuring themselves. But even looking at big cats today, like lions and tigers, they had some pretty significant floppy lips covering their big fangs. So maybe something more akin to that, but maybe not all the way down. That's just my guess, but yeah.
That's Mauricio Anton mentioned in our interview as well, that from his research, not really much of support, bulldog floppies, but for scimitar cats, I think that would have been more plausible on them since they had proportionally shorter saber teeth than the larger dark-toothed cats like Smilodon.
Yeah, I think so. And, for the saber cats that had some kind of a bony back, or a backing to support their upper canines, there's a few of them that have kind of a buttress that they rest against. I think those ones might have a good argument for having a big covering of some sort. But Smilodon itself just doesn't. I don't know if it's totally plausible for them to be covered all the way down.
That seems to be the common point of view among scientists and books to other paleo artists, is not to fully cover the sabers on Smilodon.
That is the worst accent I've ever heard.
Yeah, don't mind me. Okay. Now the big one here. What is your stance on Tyrannosaur Tegman that really has become kind of a whole potato following the Carr Bell et al. Paper in 2017, and outside of theropods that we know for a fact have feathers, what is your stance on putting feathers on other large non-Coelurosaurian theropods?
Well, I mean, from what we're seeing currently, the evidence for feathers is quite a bit stronger than the evidence against feathers on the side of theropods, in any case. We have very few skin impressions from any kind of theropod. We have a few foot impressions, few little patches of skin here and there. The only one that I can think of in terms of large theropods that we have definitive skin impressions for is T-Rex. And the fact that, a large cousin of T-Rex, Eutyrannus, 40 million years before T-Rex, was covered in integument, that just tells me that maybe being unfeathered is more the derived condition. And I'd say that there's a fair assumption based on how far back we're seeing feathers now, like right down at the base of Dinosauria. Excuse me, Coelurosauria. or wait, sorry, no, I meant Dinosauria. Never mind. Scratch that out, please. Right down at the base of Dinosauria, we're seeing feathers. So I think that it's fair to assume that, you know, other big theropods that evolved, you know, in other directions than T-Rex, they're just as likely to have retained feathers as Eutyrannus was. If anything, who knows? Maybe T-Rex is an anomaly, and maybe T-Rex did have some feathers that just weren't, you know, preserved in that one specimen with skin. Who knows? I think it's anyone's guess at this point. But phylogenetic bracketing does say that feathers were everywhere, so I think it's just as safe to put them on as it is to leave them off.
Though some scientists will definitely strongly argue more for a scaly Tyrannosaurus Rex.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, for T-Rex itself, I think it's safe to say that it was probably scaly, because you can't have feathers, you know, on the scales. You can't have both coinciding on the same tissue because their origination is the same. It is the same tissue. So you kind of need to choose one or the other. And the most recent evidence looks like T-Rex is featherless. So I'm okay to accept that until the next thing's found. That's half the fun, right? Just waiting for the next thing to change everything.
Well, it's all speculation until
Exactly.
there is actual evidence.
Yeah. I try not to get too attached to any of these concepts, and I just kind of have fun with the latest what-ifs.
Yeah, and we've also found other skin samples from other related Tyrannosauridae members like Talbosaurus from Mongolia, and that's largely scaly to some extent, including that Daspletosaurus species that was discovered recently, D. Taurosis, had, you know, crocodilian, like, you know, bumpy skin on the face, and some also started to
Oh, yes.
T-Rex just like that too.
Yeah, I forgot about that. The face. Mm-hmm. I mean, I would certainly believe that Tyrannosaurids probably did have, you know, a thick keratinous, a scaly keratinous face. Just the, you know.
Okay, and one of my last question from the document is about the awesome bro side of things.
Oh no.
Okay, what is your actually that's one of my second to last ones, pardon me.
The
first
right.
question is, what is your view on the awesome bro aspect of Paleoart in dinosaur depictions in popular culture? For those that may not know what this means, this awesome bro basically means showcasing dinosaurs as savage killers, monsters, and really looking monstrous in their design. Also, just going out of their way to show, you know, high amounts of violence, blood, gore, you know, roaring and stuff like that.
The good stuff.
Right. Yeah. Obviously. I would say that, you know, there's got to be room for that. You cannot get away from that with dinosaurs, and I understand that it's not scientifically accurate, and I don't think that's what it's ever been meant to be. I think that people just need to kind of separate those two things into two different categories. One is dinosaurs were animals, and the other one is dinosaurs are monsters. And one is scientific, and the other one it's fantasy. And I think that's okay if people want to indulge their fantasy and believe that dinosaurs were these gigantic raging beasts that just wanted to tear down cities like Godzilla. That's, you know, or rip each other limb from limb, whatever the case. That's okay. People can you know, take on their whatever they want out of that, but they also just need to kind of understand that one is science and one is not. I mean, on the other side of that, I mean, there's plenty of brutal, how do I say this? Like brutal scenarios in real life. You know, a lion hunt is not a pretty thing. It's going to be vicious and terrifying and very, very bloody.
Also, there must be the point to, like, because that's the exact position you are in, is if you're being asked to paint a specific specimen and that specific specimen has wounds or died in a specific way or got eaten or
Like, that's a
whatever.
story that you're telling, right?
Yeah, part of the story.
And I think that's okay. I just think that it also needs to be acknowledged that these animals were not always that. And these animals, you know, they'd stop by a stream, they'd have a drink, they'd scratch a tick off of the back of their neck, they would munch some leaves at sunset. I'm sure there'd be a million beautiful depictions that you could also choose. But, you know, to think that they were always these monsters screaming and running around, it's just, you know, there's a time and place for that, but it's not all the time. It can't be all the time.
Well, that's I find myself in that hole as well, because I've got to do two stories for every issue, and at the beginning of every story has to be a kind of day in the life of.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't always just have, and they went for a hunt and he ate the head and whatever. You look for if there's proof, then that gives you your story, and you're accurate in some way. And if there isn't, then you do a day in he's just walking along and it's a lovely sunset.
Mm-hmm. Oh, good. I'm glad that you do get both worlds in there. It's important.
Well, otherwise it just gets stale and boring. You know, like even just as an artist, you just can't do the same thing over and over and over again.
Yeah. Well, that's just it. Like, the shock factor just becomes dull after a while, right?
Yeah.
Oh. Hey, girl.
Sorry, that's my stomach. That's a bit.
My cat's meowing at me. Oh, poor dear. I don't have any cucumbers for you right now.
That's a good thing, isn't it?
Probably. She wants to be entertained.
The life of a pet owner. Okay, here. Yeah, regarding Awesome Bro stuff myself, I mean, it's got its point in place, but that's actually one of the... This kind of leads into my next one. It's what are some of the issues you've come to notice with dinosaur documentaries, past and present, and how would you pose and correct said issues? These can be anything from sensationalism, misinformation, trying to pass off what is speculation as concrete facts, and just other miscellaneous issues that you've had that you may have with documentaries, especially pop culture ones.
I mean, a lot of everything that you just said, they are recurring issues. I mean, a statement of false or uncertain facts, or, you know, presenting information as certain fact when it isn't. That is definitely one of the bigger issues. I guess visually, one of the things that I'll always be annoyed with is stomping and roaring before you hunt or before you fight. There's always these fight scenarios, or, you know, T-Rex is on the hunt, and then he spots a herd of hadrosaurs or montosaurus, and, you know, first he's gonna run after them, and he's just gonna be screaming at the top of his lungs. That's assuming that theropods can roar, and B, making the most ridiculous assumption of a hunt. What kind of predator announces itself before attacking? Anyway, that's one of my own personal gripes.
Yeah, the whole, you know, roaring to announce my presence, that's an awesome broy thing I was going to allude to earlier.
It definitely is.
And so, I mean, it's just no predator in real life, you know, deliberately lets their prey know that they're there before they go in for the attack.
Mm-hmm.
You know, unless it's infected with, like, rabies or something that makes it act, you know, all foolish.
I wonder if there was rabies. There was probably some kind of rabies.
Okay. Now I might want to ask, the one thing we haven't talked about is Animalogic itself. I'm curious to know how the whole concept for that show came about.
Oh, man. So, it's kind of weird, but let's see, in 2014, I think it was 2014, yeah, I had done this 1-minute interview with the social media team at the ROM to talk about how I reconstructed an early Acanthodian fish from Ontario that was just being published. And I did the press release image for it, and they just wanted to hear the story about it. So they posted this video of me talking about my work and about this fish onto YouTube. And about a week later after that was posted, I got a cold call from a media company called Blue Ant Media, and they told me about this concept that they had in the works called Animalogic, and they were curious if I'd want to go in and do a camera test and see if I'd be interested in doing, hosting for it. So, I was, it sounded like the coolest opportunity ever, so I had to do it, but I was also really terrified because I don't consider myself a good public presenter or a comfortable speaker. I'd say I'm kind of awkward in that sense. So I went in and I did it because I just wanted to see how far this could go. And they really liked what I did. They said I had an awkward charm, and I don't know what that means, but I'll take it. And I've just been running forward with it ever since. And I guess now we're doing our 4th season, and we just got funding for another. So we're going to keep on doing it and expanding outwards and making this whatever we can.
You never know where any path will lead, so it's always good to get in and try it, even if you feel like it's not in your wheelhouse, so to speak.
Yeah. I guess they liked the fact that I was an illustrator, and when I went in and did my test, I mentioned that, hey, that's what I do. Well, I guess they knew that from the interview. But I had the idea that maybe I could do an illustration for every episode, and we kind of integrated that idea into the concept. And it turns out that's a part of the show that everyone really likes, so we're going to keep on doing that. But I gotta say, I never once thought that I'd be any kind of face to anything. So, yeah, it feels like a really awesome opportunity that I'm really grateful to have. Well, it's all about science education, so it's really near and dear to my heart.
Very much so. And my follow-up to this is, what goes into producing an episode of Animalogic from concept to then finally recording it and then finally posting it up on YouTube?
Yeah, well, let's see. We have a few people working on this show, and for 3 of them, it's a full-time job. We have my producer, who's part of the, he does a lot of the research for every episode and creates content for the script. I help him with the script and kind of do some fact-checking and add a little bit here and there, some personal touches, And we have another one who helps with the research side of things, just to make sure that everything that we're saying is as accurate as possible, and finding some interesting facts about animals. And let me see. Yeah, so there's 2 people in our team who was those same people that I was just mentioning. They also source video from the internet. Sometimes it's from stock sites or BBC or National Geographic, or even just some really good YouTube uploads. And they'll reach out to them, and they'll properly license all the images and all the video that we end up using. This past year, we've got a little more budget to work with, so they've actually been going out to zoos all over the country and in the U.S. to try and shoot good video of these animals themselves, because they have some experience in that. And so we've been able to add quite a bit of that ourselves. So once we have all the content, it starts with the script, and then we find visuals to back up the script, and then I go in and we do the on-camera and the off-camera recording, and then once that's all in, they send it off to our editor, who actually lives in New Zealand, and he lives in a van, and he just travels around and lives that amazing life. And then he sends the edited content back to us, and we kind of make sure that everything's as it should be. In the meantime, I do the illustration at home of the animal. I just, I make myself these big, gigantic reference pages of images of these animals from as many angles as I can, and then I come up with a pose, and I just go to work, and I illustrate the animal, and I record the whole process using software, and then I send that to the editor, and then he kind of cuts that into the episode, and by the end of it, got a pretty darn good episode. So that's the, I guess, the rough definition of how it works.
Yep, just like with any, television show that deals with, science and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, one last animal logic question. What has been your favorite episode of Animalogic to do overall, and what are some future episodes that are currently planned for this year, if you're allowed to discuss those?
I think that one of my favorite ones so far has been our wasps episode, because there were so many like truly horrific details and features about these animals that I really loved digging into that and hopefully getting some reactions out of people. And it ended up being our most viewed episode yet. And I think it's because of just how shocking some of the facts were. You can't help but be fascinated by that, right? So I had a lot of fun with that one. But I do think that the episodes are getting better and better because people are learning just what works and what doesn't. And I'd say that our most recent episode on moray eels has been one of my favorites ones so far. So upwards and onwards.
Yeah, I thought the moray eel episode was a pretty cool one, personally.
Oh, thanks.
Pretty cool. I've got just a few more, and then we can definitely wrap up if you're okay with that.
Okay, yeah, I need to go pretty soon.
Yeah, I missed a few earlier.
Okay.
Alright, I'll keep it simple here. Alright, this one was submitted by Mark Flessa. He wants to know, what is your favorite specimen, paleontological specimen on this planet of the realm that most visitors really might not appreciate, for whatever?
I'd say it's our hadrosaurs. Everyone underappreciates hadrosaurs. They're fantastic animals, and they're just so weird. I mean, look at these crested creatures with these bony structures on top of their heads. I mean, we know what they were for, but we don't really know exactly what they were for. They made noise, and they probably accentuated their olfactory senses, but I think that they're just incredibly weird and very, very graceful looking animals.
They're a lot more than just the cows of the Cretaceous.
Absolutely. They're so charismatic. Parasaurolophus, another one of my favorite dinosaurs, so I'm biased.
And I get to work with the type specimen.
Ah! Very nice.
And hadrosaurs weren't entirely defenseless, contrary to what you might see in pop culture.
No animal's entirely defenseless.
Nah.
Alright, last one here. Okay. What do you consider to be your magnum opus, a Paleoart piece? And conversely, is there a piece that you weren't entirely satisfied with how it turned out in the end?
My magnum opus, I would say, is most certainly the murals that I did for the Zool exhibit. It's been a dream of mine my entire life to be able to make museum murals. The fact that I got to do that for dinosaurs, I mean, that's just, it's a dream come true, and I hope that I can do more and do better each time. On the second half of that question, I'd say satisfaction of my own art is a tough one to come by. I feel like almost every piece is kind of a foray into something new. So there's a lot of things that I feel pretty tentative with when I'm trying them for the first time. Maybe it's painting water in a realistic way, or maybe it's catching the light just right on the scales. I'd say, I'm constantly learning, and every project that I get is building upon the last. So I think that the newer things that I'll do will always be a little bit better than the older things, and hopefully I can keep on moving and keep on improving. I don't think I'll ever stop learning, so.
It's a very good sentiment to live by. And do you have any closing words you'd like to impart to the audience that will be watching this?
Just stay passionate about the things that you love and keep working hard. Work hard. That is the biggest lesson in life.
You probably get that a lot, like, "Oh, you're so lucky to do that." I'm like, "Yeah, it's funny how the harder I work, the luckier I get."
Oh yeah, that is 100% the lesson that I've learned through life. That if you're comfortable, it means that you're not moving forward. So push yourself. Try something that you haven't tried before. If you're a paleo artist, do something that you never thought that you could do. I didn't think that I could handle these murals, to be honest. But I somehow got through to the other side, and they're up on a wall in a museum now.
Well, there was only one way you're going to find out.
Exactly.
And that is to
to paleo artists, keep on working hard, keep on paying attention to that research, and just don't lose your passion for things. If it gets too hard, then take a break, but come back at it.
Yeah, that's a very good message to live by. I've seen too many artists, get burned out, after doing the same thing over and over and over again. But like I said, if you really like something, stick to it. But also try to diversify, if you can.
That is a good point. I'm also terrible at stopping when I should, and I go through periods of burnout. And I'm still learning how to balance myself a little bit on that regard. It's an important lesson to learn.
Yeah, another piece of advice I would also impart to some other artists out there is try not to be typecast as being only known for one particular thing. There's some people that only know such art as, he does, Castle, or in my mutual, or Bob Eccleston says, a Godzilla artist. Well, he can do so much more than just giant monsters, as anyone can attest
that's right.
to.
Yeah, so try stepping outside of your comfort zone, because that'll only expand your toolkit. You'll have more to work with the next time that you want to do something.
Also, we work in paleontology. If there's one lesson we've learned, is don't specialize and become like the expert in one thing, because that's all got one.
Are you calling somebody out?
I'm not calling anyone. I'm just saying, like, we can see it in the fossil record that when animals become too reliant on their one speciality, once the need for that speciality is gone, you're kind of extinct. So it's good to have in your toolbox a lot of different skills, as you were saying.
That's a really good point. Learn from evolution. Diversify.
Yes.
Stay adaptive.
Grow gills.
Yeah, easy peasy. Just do it.
Or grow wings.
I did that. It got boring.
Well, anyhow.
Either ways.
Yep. Okay, here. This is where I will conclude things here. I'd like to say once again, as the host of the podcast, Danielle, thank you so very much for coming on here tonight.
Thank you for having me. I had a great time chatting with you guys.
Yeah, it was the honor's all mine. This was 2 years in the making since we first pitched this in 2017 at Dino Fest.
Oh, I'm sorry. Your accent is killing me.
That's killing me. It's like fingernails down a blackboard.
It's better than I could do, though, I think. But yeah, since Paleo Fest, this has been bound to happen. I'm glad we finally got to do it.
Yep. And you, Phil, thank you for coming all the way from the land down under to co-host on the show tonight.
Oh, you're fair dinkum welcome there, mate.
Phil, you know that you should be trying to make an American accent now, right?
That would get me shot. And there's so many of them.
Okay, well, I mean, you can settle for Canadian. That's all right too.
So what's that about, eh?
Nailed it.
Thank you very much.
And so, to our listeners, this has been Prehistory, a traveler's guide. I've been your host, Gag Nuneman, and I will bid you all a good night.